Well, welcome everybody. My name's Han, and I'm from Google. And this is a DOM part API that Risque Test, Justin, Mason, and I worked on it with a few meetings between us. Next slide, please. Yeah, just to give a little background. So template instantiation was initially proposed by Apple in 2017, and it generated a lot of interest. So I have some slides here, or some links to the different discussions. The outcome of that discussion in 2017, and there was another further on discussion in 2019, was that the initial proposal was too broad because it included syntax, parts, and template processors. We want to focus mostly just on the DOM parts API to have a little more scope around that area, and so that it can be basically released. It's easier to actually release that. Okay, next slide, please. So why do we want to do this, right? And so for the DOM APIs, there's really no easy way to update large chunks of HTML. So for one, we want to provide a better way for web developers to update different chunks of HTML, so better economics. Another way is we definitely want to improve performance for these updates. So this proposal includes batching of multiple DOM updates for performance. And we want it to be easily clone DOM tree that has parts attached to it for repeated updates. So you can think of it as a tree or a list with just a template instance, or just a node instance where you want to repeatedly update with data. So that is the reason. Next slide, please. And in terms of features, so we want to scope this. What will be part of this DOM API versus what is for the future and not discussed in this API. So the features include like inserting and replacing content at the specific location of DOM tree, updating multiple parts of the same attribute. So if you have an attribute with different parts, you can update it at the same time. Updating JS properties. So that is a big ask from the initial proposal by the framework authors that this is a critical feature that's needed. Batch updates. We want to basically, for performance reasons, batch all the updates together. And lastly, cloning tree with parts. So once you have inserted your parts into a node tree, you want to be able to clone that node tree with different parts and continue updates. What's for future discussion and not included in this proposal is expressions within the DOM parts, conditionals like if-else, loops, and then template processing model from the previous proposal. Next slide, please. So what is a DOM part? A DOM part is a unit of mutable state in the DOM tree. So it can represent an element's content attribute. It can also represent a node children, or a partial. It can represent the whole children of a DOM node or partial children of a DOM node. So that is, and also JavaScript properties of the element. Next slide, please. Okay, here is the API. So we have a part. You can set its value. We'll get, in the next slide, we'll see how setting the value doesn't actually automatically commit the value into the DOM tree. So there's a commit function or method. There's a node part, which this part is associated with the node. There's an attribute part for this part to be associated with the attribute. and a child node part, which then it's representing a portion of the children that's associated with the node. Next slide, please. So how does this actually work? So here's the example of that. And the example HTML is used just for reference. So we don't have the syntax. So this is just for illustration. You can see that there's a name and there's email. So there's a node part, an attribute part, and also another node part. So how do you construct this? So in the JS, you would create the node parts, assign the value, you see, and the value, when you assign the value, this is what we call staging the value. So the value is actually associated with the part, but it's not committed into the DOM tree. And it's only committed once you commit. So for each part you do commit, the value is written into the DOM tree. And the result you see is the HTML with all the value being inserted into the DOM nodes. Okay, next slide. Here is the property part, and this is one of the most consistent feedback from the original proposal. But the consideration for supporting this feature property part is that we don't want to jump back and forth during the commit phase. So when you're doing a batch commit, you don't want to, because the property part actually can run JavaScript if it's a custom element property. So what we want to do is we want to batch all the commits for DOM mutations up front. And then we want to add an enhancement to the custom element callback reaction called this property reaction. And this property reaction will be called after the batch DOM mutation has been finished. Then you will call the customer reaction queue for attribute setting, attribute change callback, property reaction. So in the property reaction, that's when the property is being set and the JavaScript associated with that property, the setter, is being invoked. So if we look at this example here, you have A and B, and some A is a customer element. And this customer element in line 2 on the example, it shows attribute value. Then go to line 4, a property value, and attribute A, attribute value 2. So how it will happen is that the attributes will be set, the customer reaction queue will be kicked off, be fired, and you will get attribute change callback, then property reaction for a property, and then attribute change callback again for the second attribute. Next slide, please. So batching. So the original proposal was to tie to a template. And the feedback from that is that, excuse me, web developers does not want this to be tied to template. So the alternate proposal, this proposal, is that we create a new parts group. The parts group can take a sequence of parts that the developer has created from a DOM node. So why do we want to do this? One of the things that we know is jumping back and forth from JavaScript to user agent DOM mutations and back to JavaScript, that's very costly. So we want to batch all these updates, and we want to batch the updates for all the different parts. So we think that there is a pretty big performance gain from this. And so it's very easy to create a part group. It's a library object, and you pass the parts that you want associated with this part group in the constructor. Once you set the value of the parts, you can call commit on the part group, and you will commit everything into the DOM tree. And last slide. Next slide, please. So cloning. So we want to introduce a new API, clone tree, which allows the developers to be able to, once they mark up a node and its tree with the different parts, so the clone tree will allow the developer to pass in an option to say that, hey, I want to clone this tree and I want the parts to be associated with the clone tree, and they will be added into the parts group that you've added into the API call as the clone options. You will get back the node and also the clone node plus all the parts that's associated with the clone node into the part group. And I think this will be a big improvement when, for example, on some use cases, like if you have a table, you want to be able to update each row of the table. So you want to clone an update or a list, for example. Okay, this is the end of my presentation. I know worst case proposal goes much more in depth, but this is just a high level view. So it's easy to see, and basically we can open up for discussion. Also, I want to say that even though it's a collaboration, but Ruski did most of the heavy lifting by writing up the proposal. So big shout out to that, to Ruski. Thank you.